The Treasury Department has warned that if the debt ceiling isn't raised, Social Security payments could stop. And in today's video, I want to cover what you need to know as this situation unfolds. But first, today's video is going to be a little different. I've reached out to a few of my colleagues for assistance in the research. And first, I talked to Andrew Biggs at the American Enterprise Institute. Now, he is the real Social Security expert, and I honestly don't know a smarter person when it comes to research on complicated federal budgets and Social Security. And I also reached out to David Stein for his help. I've followed David's work for a long time, and when I have a really tough question about how economic issues may affect my audience, I turn to him for help. And this federal debt is a complex topic that is often misreported in the media, and I can't think of a better person to help me untangle all of this than David. You can find him on his podcast, Money for the Rest of Us, which is one of the highest rated investing podcasts. But since you're already here, I'd highly suggest you go and subscribe to his YouTube channel if you want to understand more about the markets and investing. And there's a link in the description where you can find it. So let me quickly summarize the issue that we are facing. Because the federal government spends more than it brings in through taxes and other revenue, it has to borrow massive amounts of money. This is the deficit, the difference between what it brings in and what it spends. As these annual deficits accumulate every year, it adds to the national debt. But there's a limit on the amount of debt the federal government can accumulate. And once they reach that limit, they no longer have the legal ability to continue spending in excess of the revenue that comes in. This limit is known as the debt ceiling. Technically, the federal government hit the debt ceiling in July of this year, but they've been able to move things around with some accounting tools to continue paying the bills. But now it's getting to the point where there are no accounting tricks left where they can pay the bills, and the debt ceiling is going to have to be raised, or the federal government is not going to be able to pay its bills. Back on September 19th, the Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. She painted a pretty grim picture of what could happen if Congress failed to raise the debt limit. And one of the things that's gotten a lot of attention is when she said nearly 50 million seniors could stop receiving Social Security checks for a time. There's no wonder this got a lot of attention. But is this the old Washington Monument strategy where they find the most valuable service and threaten to close it or turn it off if certain things don't happen? Well, that's not real clear. For the past several years, the Social Security Administration has had more revenue coming in than was needed to pay benefits. And the money that wasn't used has accumulated in the trust fund, and it's now around $2.9 trillion. Starting this year, they're going to start using some of that money to pay out benefits. So there shouldn't be any issue paying out benefits until this debt ceiling drama is over, because after all, they have the assets, except the excess money was passed along to the federal government to spend. And in its place, the trust fund now holds $2.9 trillion in government bonds. And if the federal government doesn't have the cash to redeem those bonds really don't have a lot of value. To dig in a little deeper, I talked to David Stein to get his thoughts. Now, in this video, I'm only going to play a portion of our conversation, but if you want to see the entire conversation, go over to my other YouTube channel where I post clips from my podcast, or you can also just go listen to my podcast, and you can find that anywhere podcasts are found. I'll link all that up below, but for now, here's a clip of our discussion. David, I want to read you something if I could. There was a statement put out by the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. I think I've got that right. Where they made the statement that while Social Security trust funds hold $2.9 trillion in U.S. government securities, the Treasury Department must have cash to pay benefits when they are due. In October, the Treasury Department is required by law to make over $90 billion in payments to 65 million retirees, disabled workers, widows, widowers, children, and spouses who receive Social Security benefits. Now, this is the part that throws me a little bit. The Treasury may not have enough incoming revenue to make those payments without the authority to cash in these securities. Absent the legal authority to borrow beyond the current ceiling, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and other payments will not be made unless Congress approves an increase in the debt limit. What are your thoughts?
That's correct. So the Social Security Administration has been taking in over its life, over 86 years, about $24 trillion. It's paid out $21 trillion. And so there's around a $3 trillion gap that they have been purchasing Treasury obligations from the U.S. Treasuries, but they're not publicly traded treasury bonds like you and I can buy. They're these special obligation bonds. And the legislation says the Social Security Administration or the trust fund has to purchase these special obligation bonds. And so if they haven't brought in enough tax revenue to make those payments, and it all flows through the US Treasuries, then they need to redeem some of those bonds. And that's what they've been doing to make these payments. But the entity that redeems the bonds that has the money is US Treasury. And so if they have reached their debt ceiling, they can't redeem those bonds. And so in that case, potentially Social Security benefits would not be paid, or at least not all of them. And so that's really the issue is the assets are there, but it's like having an asset and there's only one entity that can buy it from you and they don't have any money. And
Right.
that's the situation we're seeing.
Which is interesting because for years I've seen the comments in my YouTube channel where people have called these worthless IOUs, and we've always kind of poo-pooed those comments and said, no, these are obligations of the the U.S. government. They're not worthless at all. But in an environment where you can't redeem those, they really don't have a whole lot of value for that brief period of time, at least, I suppose.
Well, nor would any
Sure.
US government debt. I mean, it's
Right.
backed by the US government. And if US government chooses to default on its obligation, then yes,
Yeah.
it's not worth what we thought it was. Now, I don't think, I don't see a situation where either party would be that stupid
Yeah.
to not pass the the debt ceiling. Now, what makes it so dangerous is, there is a path that the Democrats could raise the debt ceiling through reconciliation. It's just never been done before. And so it's sort of a game of chicken. The Republicans are saying, no, this Democrats, you're gonna have, this is how you're going to have to do it. And the Democrats are saying, we don't want to do it that way because that's not how it's been done before. And it will probably go until October 17th or right up to the wire.
So hypothetically, the, the federal government still has revenues coming in. So they're not having to borrow everything. So they can make decisions about how to allocate those revenues that are coming in potentially
They
to
could.
move
Mhm.
that over to Social Security to say that we're gonna fill this gap in while we can't generate new debt necessarily by redeeming these treasury bonds, or to redeem these treasury bonds, we can move some of this revenue over to fill in this gap. Because I think right now
They
the
could.
revenue from payroll taxes is around 90% of what's needed to pay out current benefits. So, it would leave a relatively small percentage. And, I would think that maybe there would be other areas that would get cut before Social Security. But in the scenario that she presented, where everything is equal and all dollars are spent equally just as they are now, then I can see the validity there where it wouldn't have enough money.
Yeah, there's some choice, but I think before they pay Social Security benefits, they'll pay. They don't want to miss an interest payment on the existing debt
Yeah,
or the redemption on the existing debt because they don't want to default on the debt.
right.
But again, this is a circus.
Yeah.
We don't have to be here, and yet we are.
And yet here
So
we
and
are.
it's all negotiations.
And so, David, in
Negotiation.
your opinion, you think that all of this is going to be avoided, even if it is at the 11th hour?
I think so, but I'm not ruling it out. I mean, there has been a lot of things happened in the past 4 or 5 years that I never thought would
You're
happen
absolutely right.
when it comes to national government politics. So you can't rule it out.
Yep.
I think it would be incredibly harmful for both parties if they let the U.S. default on its debt. I it, and it'll be harmful to us as investors.
Ultimately, I agree with David that neither political party is going to let the deadline get close and not raise the debt ceiling. But whatever happens, I'll be right here to keep you informed. And once again, I'd highly suggest you go and subscribe to David's YouTube channel. There's a link for it in the description. Thanks for watching.